are joined by the amazing, the beautiful Jen Allen. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. I know the timing's perfect. It's New Year. You just landed your new role. So there's a lot of interesting questions lined up today, and I'm hoping to have fun.
Let's have some fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Then one of the things that I'm constantly hearing a lot of people talk about this year is buyer enablement. How do you think it's going to be the number one factor for closing deals in 2023? What's your 2 cents on it?
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents. And remember, it's only worth 2 cents. I think if you look at the environment where they're in right now, right, it's a lot harder for executives to make purchases. When we as sellers look at the job of selling through the lens of the things that we are doing, in many ways, that actually makes the job of buying harder for buyers. So I think one of the most important things for all of sellers to be considering this year is just exactly what we're asking that buyer to do. We're asking them to walk into a CFO's office after they've made layoffs, after they've cut budgets, after they've said no to a bunch of stuff that they want to do, and raise their hand and ask for money. That is the most difficult job. And so when we are working with a buyer who's actually interested in buying what we sell, I think we have to look at it through the lens of how can we make that moment, that particular job, so much easier. It comes down to things like, how do I make this case of cost of inaction? If we do nothing, what is that costing us? How do I actually simplify the job of writing up the business case? Like, how much of that can I take off that buyer's plate? So I'm not asking them to do it on top of a million other jobs that they're already thinking about. How do I consider the perspective of the person that they're getting approval from, if it's the CEO, the CFO, whoever, and consider that into my my pitch and my business case. So I think when we look at it that through that lens this year, it's going to be a necessity, not just something only great sellers do.
You brought me right back at my another question that I wanted to ask you, right? I know you're a huge advocate of focusing at the cost of inaction over ROI on any deals, right? Deep into a deal cycle, talking about the cost of inaction, what kind of impact it brings in is going to be really helpful when you talk to sales leaders or people who are actually end users. But what a lot of AEs, including myself, have been noticing is, like you mentioned, CFOs are getting involved in every deal. There's a lot of delay, there's a lot of stalling that's happening, right? In this kind of a situation, even if the sales team or the end users are up for it, they're completely in, and CFOs are stalling the entire process, what are some ways that AEs can adopt to or adapt to navigate through the entire process to move forward?
Yeah, this is a great question, right? So I think first it's important for us to consider, again, from a buyer's perspective, what is the messaging we receive look like? And I will tell you, when I co-founded this community, social with Will Aitken and Nick Capozzi, a lot of people saw founder in my title, and I started getting all this outreach. And I was like, this is amazing, because now I get a perspective on what it's like to be a buyer, even though I'm not buying anything. And I will tell you, it's everything we think it is. It is, we're the leading provider of X. We're the number one provider of this. You'll get a 15 times ROI. I don't know why everybody has a 15 time ROI, but it's the magic number, right? And so we are being blasted with these messages, and so are CFOs. And so if I'm a CFO and literally every provider under the sun is coming to me saying, we will have a 15 times ROI, we will 15 times your lead, 15 times your growth, all of that starts to sound like noise. So as sellers, one of the things we have to be mindful of is we need to cut through the noise by being and sounding different in a way that's relevant to your buyer. So here's what a CFO really cares about, right? Like, everybody promises an upside. They have a skepticism around that, around how much of that upside actually happens versus you get one customer who hits it big and this is a one-time tail. What they do care about is, what is it costing me to run my business the way I'm currently running it? So if we think about a large scale trend, which is, people are cutting staff, that means every individual person in that business is now having to do more with less. As a result, balls will drop. It's just the way it is, right? If you've got less people doing more things, balls will drop. And so what CFOs often care a lot about is, where are we actually overcomplicating, making processes more inefficient because of the fact that we've had to reduce headcount? And what can we do to make sure we're not introducing risk, error, problems in our customer experience And so what they look at it is what is the problem costing the business versus what is the solution to solve that problem cost me? They're not looking at what is the solution cost and what is the upside. They're trying to figure out, can we tolerate status quo in our business today? So the number one way I encourage sellers to think about cost of inaction late stage is by converting it to cost of delay. Meaning, what is the cost every week, month that this deal gets pushed out that we are incurring by continuing to solve the problem the way that we're currently doing it? When you can size it down into a meaningful way and say, like, in the last 2 weeks, this is how much it's been costing you, and this is the risk you've been presented with, that's when people start to associate, shoot, there's an actual implication of the delay.
I love that. I think that's something that I'm going to look at, in the deals that are upcoming as well. Good that you brought about social. I know you co-founded it. Great place for creators to be at. And incidentally, you also took over the role to head community growth at Lavender, one of my favorite companies. So talking about communities, I know it's all exciting. So talking about communities, leveraging communities to grow your brand's presence, right? It's organic again. It's just that the more loyalty you build, the more it's going to benefit you, right? What do you think companies are doing wrong in today's ecosystem with community growth, or with building their community or leveraging them?
Yeah, look, first of all, I'm not an expert in community. It was one of the things, like, I told Will when I joined the company, I was like, I've co-built social, but I'm not this community expert. But here's what I have done and what I believe strongly to my core. I think the very best communities are not about the number of people in the community or the number of like sponsors you have in the community. I think the very best communities become these really safe havens where whoever the community ICP is, like for me, it's sellers, where they say, if I'm frustrated with the coaching I'm getting from my manager or the training I'm not getting from my organization, I turn to this place, not because it's the company so much, but because of the quality of the other people in that community and what I'm able to learn that I wouldn't be able to learn myself. So I'm not in this camp of like, have a community and just talk all about your product and all the features and all that stuff. Like, there's a time and place for that. But I think the very best communities are those places where you're saying, man, I learned this thing. It really helped me solve a problem that's so core to my job. And so I'm going to keep coming back to that community because not only do I believe I can learn more, but I now want to teach that stuff to other people who have that same problem. That to me is the beauty of community.
Becomes a go-to place for sellers or anybody who your ICP is. That's great.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a better person for me to ask this question to. One of the crucial aspects, I think, when I read the Challenger Sales book, is when you have to close a deal, at least when you're going towards closure, one of the most important things is for you to build credibility and show that you are an expert in what you're talking, and when you recommend something that it's actually going to benefit them, right? What are your top 3 tips for AEs, to do that, to build that credibility through the process?
Yeah. So there's only one word I would change in all of that, which is the word expert. You will never hear me use the word expert because expert is setting this expectation that I am now going to talk down to you. Like, you, the buyer, know less than I do as the seller. And that tonality, I made that mistake so many times. It puts people off. No one likes to feel like someone is coming in saying, I'm smarter than you. So step number one, piece number one, don't set yourself up to be the expert, right? Set yourself up to be someone who has an informed, curious point of view. And so here's how I do that. One, if I get time with a seller, with a customer, I take that so seriously because an executive only has so many hours and they are choosing to give some of it to me, right? So if they can give me 30 minutes, I sure as heck can spend an hour or 45 minutes looking into their business and forming a point of view. So the way I do that is, one, I am looking up the CEO, Googling like CEO plus podcast, CEO plus interview, and I'm listening, reading to the transcripts. How are they talking about what that business is trying to achieve? Like, what's end state? Then I'm looking for what are the priorities, the projects, the initiatives that they're talking about that they believe will get them to that end state. And then I'm putting those puzzle pieces together and saying, what might they be missing? Not what are they missing, but what might they be missing? And I bring that to the call to say, I'm not going to spend the first 15 minutes doing niceties and pleasantries and talking about the weather. I'm going to get right into it and say, look, your time is precious. I've spent some time looking at your business. I'm an outsider. However, here's what I've been able to see from the outside. It looks like you're trying to achieve this. It looks like these are the things you're doing in pursuit of achieving that. But I'm curious, have you ever looked at how this other thing over here you're not talking about might actually impact the likelihood of your success? What am I missing? Right? If that's a play you can run on every single call, and it sets it up for a two-way conversation where you're not coming in and talking at someone, but you are demonstrating right off the bat, I take this time very seriously and I'm coming in with a point of view. Now let's work together to figure out what I'm missing.
I like that. I see your baby behind you, so that's a good
Yeah.
thing as well.
Of course, now he wants to go out. I'm like, you can wait.
Of course. So one of the things I think, since we're more talking about deals and selling in general, when somebody gets into their first discovery call, right? When they're meeting with the prospect for the first time, what are some frameworks that you have? Maybe like if you have like a specific framework for AEs to jump into the discovery call, what should they be looking at to make the best use of their time? Again, to not sound as an expert, to make sure that it is a productive call.
Yeah, love this question. The first framework I would say is throw out any sort of ban the bant is my personal opinion. I've got a very strong one on that because ban is so self-serving, right? Yes, ban it. Ban is like, are you good enough to talk to me? That vibe is just off. I'm not here for that whatsoever, right? What I would say is go in saying, we used to talk about this at Challenger, is like reframe potential. Go in and say, here's the objective that the company is trying to reach. And there's not going to be a ton, especially if you're selling to salespeople, right? Like they're trying to grow, they're trying to sell more products. Like there's not 85 things on that list. So figure out what is the objective and then figure out how are they trying to achieve it today, right? So I'm trying to learn current state in my discovery. Looks like you're trying to achieve this. Is that fair? Yes. Okay. What I've seen on the outside is it looks like you're doing A, B, and C. What am I missing? Well, we're actually doing D2. Okay. Now, if I consider all of that, there's one thing I haven't heard you talk about, and it's this thing over here. Tell me about why that is. Is it something you've tried? Is it something you just fundamentally disagree with? Right? Like, notice the difference between are you the decision maker? Do you have budget? Like, what's your timeline? It's all very me versus where I'm trying to create this atmosphere in a discovery call of I am looking at your business like a peer. Like I'm looking at it as someone who worked there. And I'm saying, I want to make sure we hit this big target that we have. Let's consider all the things that we might not be thinking about. And that's what I think activates buyers to have a two-way conversation. Not, am I a good enough prospect, but rather, are you a good enough participant in the conversation in the way that you add insight to what we're trying to achieve instead of just looking to extract?
I love that, right? So this is one of the things, again, it ties back to buyer enablement, I think, where you're educating the prospects on or shining light on things that they're probably not aware of as well. And that's one of the things that I really like doing at, on my discovery calls. I ask them things that they probably are not aware of, or, give them a perspective and say, hey, is this something that you already have taken care of or something like that? So, they know, oh yeah, that's actually a problem. Let me think. So at least give them that. And, I think I'm glad that I'm doing something right. And we're both on the same page there.
I think you're probably doing more than just something right. Give yourself some credit.
I appreciate it. So I think this is one thing that I've been reading about a lot on LinkedIn. You've seen how ChatGPT is everywhere, right? AI is booming for sure. It's doing right things, but there are a lot of fear in terms of certain sales folks that I speak with in terms of, or there's a lot of debate going on in terms of are ChatGPT or tools like ChatGPT or these kind of technologies going to replace SDRs? The sales going to become fully AI driven and things like that. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's right for people to be uncomfortable. I think moments of discomfort are the biggest opportunities for growth, right? So we've been barking on for years about how SDRs can't just send the same boring mass emails to everybody and hope that they make like actual connections with buyers. How long have we been talking about that, right? And behavior hasn't shifted. Yeah. ChatGPT comes on and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we need to be more relevant. We need to be more personalized. Yes, we've been talking about this for a really long time, but okay. So I'm in favor of the conversation that it is sparking. My personal belief is ChatGPT is incredible, right? There's some really cool things. But in my opinion, the very best SDRs, the very best sellers don't rely on something else to do the work for them. right? There's as good as it can be, it still will lack a human element. It will still lack that thing that sparks a buyer and that connection. And so like, this was one of the reasons I was really drawn to Lavender, because I am not in favor of AI replacing sellers. I am in favor of AI acting as a coach, right? So not to go into a deep dive on Lavender, but what I loved about it is like, as you're writing an email, the AI is saying, hey, that sentence structure tends to result in a lower reply rate, or hey, that use of I, we, us tends to reduce in a lower, and it's just reminders that are there to aid us in our writing instead of replacing us. So I think, and I intentionally seek out technology tools that are using AI in that manner, because I think there's something so core to the human spark we create as sellers that, you know, I can't read the future, but I don't think ChatGPT is going to emulate.
Right. So we're talking about emails. What's Jen's favorite thing to do? Cold email or cold call?
Oh my gosh. Listen, my entire career in sales has been built upon getting better at writing so I don't have to make cold calls. I know that's an unpopular opinion. I am not in the camp of like cold calling is dead. If you can do it, great. Thank God for you. But I personally have just always been rubbed the wrong way by calling and interrupting someone, because I personally hate getting cold calls or calls from customer service, any sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Weirdly introverted like that. So I have worked my entire career to make it so that I could use social and writing to do it. So if I had to pick one, cold emails all day long.
Now that you're at cold email, now that your team cold email, why don't you give us like our SDRs like a quick framework on what their email should look like? Any pointers for them to focus at least this year?
Yeah, I'll give you the one that's worked most consistently for me. So subject line is the CEO's name, comment. So let's say my CEO is Jane Doe. So I write Jane Doe's comments. That's provoking an open, because if I get an email with my CEO's name on it with comments, my first thought is, what did she say about me? And is it bad or is it good? Right. So that earns me an open. Now, you cannot write an irrelevant email to that, because that will actually drive a lot of frustration with your buyer. So your body has to be relevant to the subject. So this is where I'm taking that research we talked about earlier and I'm getting right to the point. Joe, Jane spoke about at your investor presentation last week that you acquired Acme Company in order to, you know, increase share of wallet with customers. From what I can tell, looks like you're doing this, this, and this in pursuit of that. However, have you ever considered how this thing over here might impact your seller's ability to cross-sell that? Curious for your take. Either way, best of luck with the acquisition. Really cool news, right? And there's a lot that I'm trying to do in that email. I'm making an observation. I'm showing I've done some homework, and then I'm asking a thoughtful question that provokes them to reflect on their problem, not my solution. And then at the end, I'm doing a really low, you know, push close saying like, either way, I'm going to be just fine if we don't have this call. But if you are interested in the topic, like I do have a point of view on it. Like everything about that email works for me and it works consistently and there's not an expiration date. And I think that's the vibe. We don't want desperate. We don't want all about us. We don't want, I saw you went to Penn State and that's cool. Like none of that stuff is working.
How about Tuesday or Wednesday, 4 p.m. or 6 p.m.?
Yeah. Like this is the other thing. When I share that email with people, they're like, but where do you put the ask for time? I'm like, these people know who we are. We have sales in our auto signature. They know we want time. They respond. We don't have to ask for it. So yeah.
I like that. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier is you're not a big fan of cold call. And throughout your career, you've been focusing on writing, social selling, and emailing, right? Focusing or a little bit around social in particular, how important do you think it is for SDRs to build a personal brand on LinkedIn? Or do you think they shouldn't be bothered at all? There are two reasons I'm asking you this. One, I talk to a lot of people who ask me, hey, how are you so active? I said, I hate it. I still do it because I know I have to, right? I can't think of topics to write about, but I still come up with something. I see something, I write about it. I probably add perspectives to it. I feel like it's a non-negotiable for me, right? That's my personal choice. And there's also been cases where there are sales leaders or certain companies who don't let SDRs build their personal brand. You're allowed to post only about your own company, about your product. I'm sure you've come across this. I would like to hear your perspective there.
Yeah. First of all, I think that's absolute trash and garbage. Like, take it to the curb. It is dumpster fire. I think I couldn't disagree with it more. There's two reasons I think building a personal brand is important. One has to do with the buyer, one has to do with the self. With the buyer, think about what makes us drawn to other people. It's people who have interesting points of view that share things that are like, this makes me look smart if I share it. So if you are doing that in the places where your customers are going to learn, and you're writing about the subject matter that they care about, which are problems, not solutions, not your company, you are going to draw buyers to you because you are interesting and you are relevant. And there's no other place you can do that, even the inbox, that you can have that kind of scale, right? So that's reason number one. It's because buyers are learning in these channels. And if you don't show up, they're learning from people that aren't you, they aren't your company. When it comes to the individual, if you are in a business who is telling you not to post about anything but the company, I know it's not this easy, but run in the other direction as fast as you can. Like, one of the things I've always been drawn to for the companies that I work for is the understanding that the person is not just a means to the company's success, but great companies invest in making that person better, even if it means they leave, right? And if you leave on a positive note, that's a good thing for the company. So for sellers, like, if you look at the people that Lavender hired in the last week, it was all through what they were able to observe just from how they showed up online. So I think you've got to really make sure that you're investing in an organization that is investing back in you. And if you're getting that kind of direction, I would question that seriously.
Great. That was quite insightful, to understand what your thoughts are around personal branding and how important is it for individuals or businesses to maintain that, at least in today's modern selling ecosystem, right? So let's lighten things up a bit. In terms of what Jen as an individual, what's your favorite sales book, if you have one?
Of course I have a favorite sales book. It's the Challenger Sale. I couldn't pick anything else other than that. I have to pick that. And truly, it's not just because I worked there. It was because it did completely change the way I sold.
And it does that for many sellers. I love reading that book as well. And I didn't think of another answer. So we're good there. I think talking along the lines of books, the next obvious question, do you have a favorite podcast that we should know? Something that's any salesperson must follow?
You know what? If I was an egomaniac, I would have said my own, which was Winning the Challenger Sale. There's a subtle plug in there. No, I'm not on it anymore. But I actually love The Influential Communicator by Raji Rajani. And I love it for two reasons. One, Raji is an incredible presenter and speaker and host and engager. And it's really hard to listen to that and not feel just his energy transfer through it. So that's one piece, is just, I like things that make me feel good and positive and energetic. But two, he touches on a topic that I don't think is talked a lot about enough in sales, which is storytelling and communication. So he brings in guests from not just sales, but other fields as well. And I always find that when I listen to it, I'm like, didn't know that. So that's always what I'm looking for with the podcast.
You've probably heard this before, Jen. You're one of the most favorite sales leaders for many individual contributors today. You inspire so many people. You inspire people. They look up to you. But who's that one sales leader that Jen looks up to?
Oh, you're coming with the good questions. I'm actually going to give, this as my answer. So I think I told you I started at Lavender. I'm on my 7th day, and Will Allred is one of our co-founders, and we're a really small company. It's 14 people now. I've obviously been shadowing him as I've been onboarding. I have watched him on calls. And the reason I think he is my favorite sales leader, it's not to get brownie points with my new boss. It's because he completely breaks the mold of what I think people traditionally believe great sales leaders are. So Will is not the loudest person in the room. He's not the most assertive person in the room. He's a phenomenal active listener. He is phenomenally brilliant with the questions that he asks. He can reframe people's thinking in a way that you don't take offense to it or feel like you've got to get defensive. And it's just so subtle. So on the sales side, I'm fascinated by him and I'm learning so much from him. But on the leader side, what I admire about him is despite the fact that he's a founder and he's building and he's, we're growing and doing all these things, he's still so intentional about looking at my world from my perspective, meaning, hey, I'm being onboarded in my first week, what might be hard, and asking me questions so that I don't have to feel uncomfortable saying, hey, I don't understand something or I'm overwhelmed here. He's really making it easy by saying, I imagine you might be feeling overwhelmed here. Am I wrong? Right. And then I could be like, no, you're right. You're right. So that's what I really like about his leadership style, not just sales leadership style.
I love that. I think this is one of the very different perspective that I've heard. I usually ask this question to people, and this one's quite a unique answer, rather, right? Great. Thank you very much for that. One last question, Jen, before I let you go. I'm not sure if hack is the right word for this, but what's the 2023 hack for GTM teams? What's that one thing that you think is going to work, or what is the one thing that you think they should be doing?
Yes, in early stage, meaning when you are trying to earn a meeting, when you're on that first meeting, don't sell ROI because everybody's talking about that and it's just become noise. Sell COI. COI is the cost of inaction or the cost of doing nothing. That's my hack.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. That's Jen Allen. I'll see you on the next one.